My people, 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 my people. Welcome to Don't Forget to Flush podcast. Oh my God, you will not believe the luck that I have on this one. Two young men, because that's the best way to describe these guys. Two young men that are changing the game from where we've always said charity begins at home. These folks are doing it from home all the way outside and changing lives. Ladies and gentlemen, this is that podcast. It's all about culture commentary. It's all about the African Renaissance. We're going to get into toilet seat conversations. Welcome to this episode. And I have Chris Madu and the man who everyone is looking for at the moment, Lawrence Uradu, right here on this podcast. Hello, guys.
What up?
Hello, Namu.
Man,
How you
doing?
First of all, I think I'm very fortunate. I don't know, people will say, who did I bribe? Who did I reach out to? Did I have to twist arms to get you guys on this podcast?
The check hasn't cleared yet, Namu. Just
no, there's no. Don't give people the wrong impression. There's no checks going out from here. No, but thank you for making our time to join us. And this episode, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening, this episode is dedicated to the idea of fatherhood, husbandhood, brotherhood. And so it's a fatherhood, husbandhood, brotherhood roundtable. That's what we're doing.
Yes,
and I have two great guys that are going to be able to help me get into some key questions. And so on this side of this particular episode, what we want to do is to get in and talk about them, talk with them and understand who they are. And then from there, have them answer a few questions, burning questions that you might also be curious about when we talk about fatherhood and husbandhood and brotherhood and all of that. And of course, I have Chris and Law. So let's get into it. Now, these two folks, one is an engineer, one is a doctor. They become brothers for life by virtue of, married into similar families. But let me take a step back, guys. What was your journey like growing up internationally, right? Your influences internationally and now living in the US. What were your respective journeys like to where you are today?
Right, let's start, Chris.
All right. So let's go. So start from birth or from before birth?
I know I'm giving you this opportunity to technically tell us this story, but man, bro, why are you trying to go start off from when you were born?
Start from before birth.
Did you see what was going on
the
before
journey,
birth?
right? So I'm like before
So my
birth.
father met my mother.
Because I think I know before birth too. It was Christmas Day before birth. So
Oh gosh, here we go. Keep going. Let me
but
hear
yeah,
that.
I was about me generally, my journey. I was born in Cameroon, first of all.
Very cool.
Nigerian parents, lived in Cameroon. I was born in Cameroon, grew up there till after high school, technically. Then we moved back to Nigeria, the whole family, and then moved back to Nigeria. I went to college, university in Nigeria, undergrad. Mm-hmm. After that point, I worked in Nigeria for about 3-4 years. Then moved to the US for my master's. Then finished my master's. After that, I stayed back in the US for 1 more year, 2 years working, trying to figure out what's next. Then I entered a PhD program. I was at Penn State throughout this period, and a PhD program. And prior to that, I'm going to speak part of Lawrence's own life as well, because we cross paths.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said you guys your paths crossed at one point.
So when I moved to the US,
that part of the gist too.
Yeah, when I moved to the US, on my first year in the US, so that was like 2010, I met Lawrence.
Okay.
So I met him, and then we had a lot in common. And we always had each other a lot.
We started grooving.
Like we groove, and then
if you see these two guys, they have the same beard. They have so much in common, like they're growing their beard the same way.
To top it all up, so I grew up in Cameroon, right?
Yeah.
Like when I was younger, before moving to Nigeria. So Makossa is something that, I kind of know. Then I meet Lawrence, who's a Nigerian in the US. What are the odds? He actually had a Makossa group.
Wow. Okay, I see that. Now, Makossa, of course, we're talking about a style of music, a genre of music that is synonymous
with Cameroon,
in those parts.
Mainly Cameroon, and then them Congo and Ivory Coast have their own, but Makossa speaks like Cameroon and all that.
Yeah.
So that happened, and then so we always hyped ourselves when we met. Especially on the dance floor, we would kill it. So that happened, and then move forward to me rounding up with school. Lawrence is also running his own, doing his own stuff. Then Lawrence got into my life from that moment a lot.
Yeah, and when you said Lawrence is doing his own stuff, Lawrence, the definition of stuff is multifaceted.
yes.
He's doing his own stuff. He's
Lawrence
many.
doing his own
He's not
stuff,
just
many things.
yeah.
Many things. So maybe I'm doing my own stuff. So and then our paths cross again to where we are today, when I guess Lawrence met his wife. And then we have had this story. People have asked us 1,000,001 times, and we have said it a lot. But Lawrence meets his wife. So in our grooving, right? Very key, grooving. That's a very key part of our lives. We always like having fun when we meet up. In our grooving, one of those weekends we met in DC, Maryland. So Lawrence pulls out a picture. I'm like, hey,
okay.
Man, this babe, this girl, this and that. I'm like, wait, let me see that picture. So he shows us the picture. Guys, now we're like, oh, yeah. we always boast about things like check her out. I'm like, wait, does she have a sister? He's like, yeah, she does. I asked randomly.
Whoa, so you are one of those that actually said the usual thing that people say and you follow through. Please keep going.
I just said it and it was like a joke. And Lauren said, yeah, she does. I'm like, wait, you're serious? He said, yes, she does. And then he pulls up Facebook, shows me Ife's pictures. I'm like, oh wow, she got it. She's a beautiful lady. She's a beautiful girl.
Yeah.
Then Lawrence is like, okay, we got to make this happen. I'm like, count me in. Then what happens after that is, I didn't follow through my own part. I had other things happening, quote unquote, other things. So after that, 2 years after that, so my life keeps up. I'm in school, doing my school stuff. Then after that, a couple of years after, I meet my wife, Ife. Now, one of my friends from school, posts a picture from a weekend in Pittsburgh, right?
Okay.
And it turns out that there's this girl in the pictures, right? I'm like, wait, who's this girl?
That's the same.
Is it that same? Yeah. I'm like, I zoom in. I'm like, I remember where I was that day. I remember exactly where I was.
I can't wait for your anniversary to talk about how you zoomed in.
I was sitting down, going through some schoolwork. Then is it that same girl? So I zoom in, look at the name, Ife Yvonne. I look at our mutual friends, it's Lawrence, and I remember Lawrence's at that point girlfriend's face,
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, this is the same girl, right? Oh, man, because backward a little bit.
Fate.
A year after I had not followed through with my words,
Yeah.
I'd asked Lawrence, okay, now I think I'm game. Where is this girl? He's like, man, you missed out. She's talking to someone now. So I'm like,
wow.
Oh my God. I'm like, I told myself I messed up, but whatever. So when I saw her on those pictures, I was kind of like, skeptical. I'm like, should I request her or not? I'm like, whatever, it doesn't hurt. So I sent a friend request.
Okay.
And as I send the friend request, she accepts, and there's a lot to that story, so I don't want to go into it.
I know, but it's just that
let me tell you the beautiful thing about this thing that Chris just said. Now you asked this guy to tell you about his life, and he raced through a significant portion of his life to get to what I think is the most important portion of his journey, which is. And then I met him, Ife, and then he spends like the last. That is a beautiful thing, though, isn't it?
Yes. And that's why I said that we had to have this conversation, because on this fatherhood, husbandhood, brotherhood,
thing,
when we try to tell people about what it feels like and why, people say, oh, the ladies' most important days are wedding day and all that. And if you really talk with guys, they tell you that, hey, getting married is also monumental. Meeting the person and knowing that the person is the one is a big one.
And it's like there's a line. There's like life before and life after.
Yep.
The further you go, the less significant life before is.
So Law, how about you tell us your own journey? Because Chris's journey is very clear. He's multifaceted. He has a Cameroon thing going, Nigeria. We're going to get into those influences, of course. But in case, as a person who introduced him to this life that he has now come into, what was your own journey like?
And he refused to leave. Nah, man. Yeah, I was born in Nigeria, born and raised in I was actually born in Ibadan.
Oh, wow.
My mom was in medical school at the time at University of Ibadan. And so nobody calls me Lawrence.
Oh, for real?
At home. As a matter of fact, when my wife came, she was like, "What the heck are they calling you?" Should they call me Professor?
Oh, wow.
They call me Prof.
Prof. Okay. Okay.
The
We're
irony
finding
is,
all these things out.
like I'm an assistant professor now, but the thing is that they call me Prof. And the reason they did that is because I was born when my mom was in med school, and all of her classmates called me Professor. So the name just stuck. As a matter of fact, when I was in the States, my aunt came to America. She said, Proficom, what is your name? What is your real name?
She grew up calling you Prof.
Most people don't know my name.
Yeah.
Most of my, not that they forgot, they just never knew what my name was. So
I see.
I was born in Ibadan, and I grew up my whole life in Lagos. I went to school in Festac. I went to secondary school in Lagos.
Shout out to Festac.
Shout out to Festac, born and raised in Festac with Festac boys. We did our thing back then.
I'm telling you.
Janiki boy too, Federal Government College, Lagos. I went to Janiki.
Now, guys, Festac is a location in Lagos, and the guys who you know how it is. And then, of course, Janiki is a school as well.
Yeah.
For high school, yeah.
So that's my background, right? That's my foundation. That's literally, so when people see me act up or act a certain way, confidence, a lot of that stems from growing up in that environment, I came to the United States in 2002. Festac boys have swag,
No, too much, man. If I'd grown in Lagos, I probably would have lived in Festac. Sorry.
Yeah. But Festac of today is not the same Festac.
It's not the same. I mean, like back then when we were growing up.
You guys are reminiscing about law.
So anyway, we go to, I come to America in 2002 and I go straight to Baltimore.
Okay.
So I'm out in Baltimore, 2002 to 2006, 2007, Morgan State. So I'm hanging out there. I'm making friends. That's where, Chris referenced my dance group. Dance was a huge part of my time in the United States. I actually paid some of my bills. People don't know this. I was not a stripper, by the way. I was doing the Congolese dance. We had a dance group. And we got paid. I was actually surprised that people were paying me to do that. Come on, wind my waist, man. They would drop some money, At that time, I was coming from Nigeria. What do I know? So my journey, a lot of those experiences shape and, who I am today, being able to stand up on a stage with, hundreds of people, it builds confidence, having a dance group together, working, building up a routine, it builds character, and then I went to med school in West Virginia, in Marshall. I did not get culture shock in the United States until I went to Marshall.
Oh, for real?
I was the only Black guy in all 4 years of med school.
Wow.
When I miss class, people notice. Are you getting me?
I see you. I see you on that one.
Yeah. So anyway, this is kind of a lot of, the journey, my journey so far. So I lived a portion of my life in Nigeria. I lived a portion of my life in an HBCU. I lived a portion of my life, in a predominantly white institution. So a lot of these things shaped me. And then obviously I met my wife. The way I met my wife, I think we should have a separate segment of how we met our wives.
No, we're going to.
I'm telling you, because if I start that discussion now, the podcast will finish.
So but before you go down that path, though, I need to ask this, because Chris opened it by talking about how much of an influence that part of his life is in his entire journey, right?
Yes.
And so my question is, first, is it true that he actually committed when he said, does she have a sister? Was that
actually no? And Chris didn't, like, Chris was a little bit hard on himself. What happened is he was actually supposed to follow me to my wife's parents' 25th wedding anniversary.
Oh, okay.
Right. So this was in, what year was this, Chris? 2013?
2012.
2012. So he was actually supposed to go with me at the time to the wedding anniversary. I mean, the anniversary.
The anniversary.
And he just couldn't make it.
And
I think if he was also graduating pharmacy school at that event as well.
That same event, yeah.
And I strongly believe that it was not his time to meet Ify, because I believe if he met Ify then, we might not be having this discussion today, from a marriage point of view, because things happen the way they're supposed to happen. She had to experience some things to to prepare her for a
This
Chris.
this podcast is not about Ify and Chris and how they met. This podcast is about the fact that you guys are so connected to the hip that between Makosa, your growing up, your influences, I hope that the listeners are able to understand how multifaceted these two individuals are. And so that when we begin to ask some of these questions that we have, you know, it would sort of tie it together because the influences are multifaceted. You know, people always ask, you know, okay, you're African, you're Nigerian. How much understanding do you know about, you know, Black culture, as it were, right? I mean, we have Lon on the podcast who went to HSBCU, right? You know, I always say it's HSBC because it's like the bank, you know, but it's the you know, HBCU. So, but you know, and then you talk about Chris, whose influence is not just Nigerian, because folks will be like, okay, maybe he doesn't have a broad view. You know, the continent is split among certain influences of colonialism, right? And so he's talking about having a Francophone experience and an Anglophone experience. So, guys, with that in mind, I guess one of the questions I want to demystify this is, people talk about the tenacity of African immigrants, right, in the United States. It's like, it's hard to ignore. You know, whether it's all the data that they talk about Nigerians and how, you know, as an immigrant community, they're doing okay, which in my mind, it doesn't really, I mean, it's not a thing to be bragged about. We're sort of living off the work of what folks have done before us. But with that in mind, what would you say is the reason why it seems like Africans go hard? I'm not talking about the opportunities. I'm just saying that they're driven by this passion of going hard in school and work. What would you both say is where this influence of this tenacity is coming from?
Well, I can start this one off, man, you know, because I mean, everybody who knows me knows that in my family, we don't play, you know. I wish I can show you guys this picture, but this is literally in my family. If anybody knows me, you know, mom is a physician. I'm a physician. All my siblings are physicians. My older sister is a nurse practitioner.
Your picture that broke the internet, you know, when you posted it.
We are, and it's not, you know, some people would think, you know, my parents forced us, say you must go. There's something my dad always says is, you know, I can't tell you, I'm not going to force you to go on a journey, right? I know the destination. There's a destination we are all trying to reach, which is a destination of financial stability, individual successes. You know, it says, I know there's road here. You see this part here, there's road.
Okay.
There may be other roads. I don't know those roads.
I know this one.
But I know there's road here.
Facts.
And if you take this path, you will reach that destination. And that's all it tells you. Now, you can explore other areas and you're free to explore. If you end up in the same destination, perfect. You know, however, you know, if they've cleared the bush for you in this road and the path is relatively straightforward, why would you venture elsewhere? You know, which is my own approach, which is what I took from that, you know. Why do we go hard? You know, growing up in Nigeria was an interesting experience, you know, where you see people struggle and, you know, work hard. And at times they work hard with nothing to show for it, you know. And when you come to America and you work hard at a smaller scale. You know, when I came here, I washed plates. You know, people talk about this journey of, oh, I washed plates. Bro, there's no job that I haven't done. You know, when I entered university, you know, I used to, I worked at the cafeteria, but I made them put me in the back to wash plates because I was chasing babes and I didn't want babes to know I was working in the cafeteria. So I said, look at
your perspective. I'm working hard, but I need to make sure that I try to have
let me be at the back. Let me be at the worst job so nobody sees.
So I said, let me stay in the back.
We were all respecting you when you said, oh, I washed plates. We're all feeling it in our spirit.
There was a method to the madness, man. You know? So not that, but you know, at the time I could only work on campus. And the only job available then was, you know, cafeteria job. So I washed plates. I did that. I worked at the mall. I worked at Gap, Macy's. There's no job, you know, that was beneath me at the time because I understood that there was a place I was trying to get to.
I see.
You know, so, and the beautiful thing that I appreciated the United States for is when you put in this effort, you see results. You put in more effort, you see more results. Unlike where I came from, where you can be hustling, if you don't know the right people. You know what I mean? If you don't know the right people, if you're not plugged into the right circles, you can work your butt off and see nothing. So when I came here and I saw that, man, it was like I needed more of that, because it was like when you get results, it kind of gives you this feeling of euphoria, and that just kept on driving me to keep going. Even till today, ask my wife. My wife is like, dude, are you not content? And I'm like,
there's no, that is not in your vocabulary.
No,
I'm just here to get to the ultimate goal.
Right now I have like 3 jobs, people I'm
so Chris, would you say that is like a similar explanation for you in terms of, African immigrants and going hard?
I mean, yeah, definitely. A lot of what Lawrence said is just the same thing, right? And also you take into consideration that there's something he said, right? He just went over it. But where there's a path, right, has been created or declared the grass for you, right? And it's not difficult. How do I mean? It's to study, right? A lot of these things involves you, requires you to study. Studying is not like it's kind of one of our strengths, if I may put it that way. So if you just need to study and get all this knowledge to get to this destination, right? Why hesitate? And then that path we're talking about comes from our parents, right? Our parents did a lot to get us to where we are today, a lot. I don't think that you might need like 10 podcasts to contain that.
No, that's his own. That's his own.
That's big.
Yeah,
that's big.
And then not only that, they didn't do it just for us. I mean, not just for me, not just for Lauren. They did it for all our siblings.
Yeah.
And it's funny that, like I said, I didn't know Lawrence till 2010. And when you said that our lives kind of intertwine, it didn't just intertwine with our activities. It intertwines a lot with our background. They were our parents trained us. They were our parents looked after our siblings and all that. I'm from a family of 10, 5 boys and 5 guys, And I think we all went to school, and about 7 of us or so have like graduate degrees, So, but on the work of our parents, right? And the way to do it is, okay, like Lauren said, if you want to get here, these are maybe 1 or 2 ways you can get there, right? These other paths, we don't know. We've not tried it. We have seen some people succeed in them, don't get me wrong.
But this is the one that we've seen.
But this is the one that we know.
Tested and trusted.
And then on top of that, we can actually pave the way for you on this path because we understand it, which falls down a lot to education, So then you're in Nigeria or you're in Africa, like he said, you're working hard, we're grateful for the foundation our parents created for us. We are very grateful for that because of the foundation they created for us. We didn't even get to experience the most of the hardship. Don't get me wrong, they had their hard times, but we didn't get to. They shielded us from a lot of the hardship.
And that's the African thing. Even if you're living in a hut, your parents will still make that the best feeling that you'll have.
And then add to the part that because how vast Africa is, right? No matter how shielded you are, you go outside, right?
Yeah.
You can't just, there's no Beverly Hills whereby your life just circles around Beverly Hills. You're still going to go into the streets, into the hood. And if you're not going into the hood or the streets, the school you go to have people that come from the hood and from the street. It's just what it is. So on top of that, you get to have a broader view of that hardship in the country. Then, that kind of, you keep maturing and growing over time. And then you now move to a place like the US, whereby very well, if you put in 1 hour, if the output is going to be $1, that $1 is guaranteed.
Yeah.
If you put in 2 hours, the $2 guaranteed, right? And how
no story.
And then how does that now motivate like someone like me? Is that okay? Good. If 1 hour is $2, 10 hours is $20. So if I want to get $2,000, how many hours?
I will work for 27 hours.
Yes, I'm serious. Like, and then because
in one day, you make it 24/7 hours a day.
And then you now find yourself sometimes, like I said, we may not have the same background or experiences like people that were born and raised here. That's true. But when we come here, we already have a formed mind, right? We come here with a goal, put it that way, with a very definite goal. So, and we are heading, at that goal. We're heading to get there. Obviously by the most, not by any crooked means, by the legal and best means possible. But we are focused. We have a goal. So I think that's another thing that kind of puts us on that path whereby we're not sleeping, because we already come here with a goal. If we don't have a goal, our parents have a goal, right?
Yeah.
And they kind of put that goal in that mentality of having a goal into us, whereby we are so focused that with everything that's happening around us, we don't take our sight
It's
off.
an vision
Yeah.
to it. Man, Namo, can I add one last point to this topic?
No,
Because
go
I
ahead.
think this is a very key point, man. And Chris, you're very eloquent there. I like every point you made. One thing I'll add though is when you've watched your parents, my parents, we all moved together.
Yeah.
When you've watched your parents sacrifice quite a bit, right, for you and your siblings, you can't pay them back with money, right? The only thing you can pay them is your success, because that's what they brag about. That's what they're going to go back and say, oh, look at my son, look at my daughter. You can't count cash and say, okay, you paid 10,000 for my school fees, or take 10,000 back. It doesn't work that way. I think that's a huge motivating factor for someone like me. You know what I mean? Because these guys have most. I talk to a lot of my colleagues, who Americans, or they have student loans. I don't have any. You know what I mean? And this is just a way this what they believe in. Like, they have to invest in their kids, and what is their return on their investment is your success, right? So I think that is critical. That's having that in the back of your mind, knowing what they put down on your head, man. You gotta work hard, man. So I think that played a major role in that.
Yeah,
So
I think you both have just cracked the code. So I've had this podcast for like 3 years or 4 years now, and I've been talking about the African Renaissance and the rise of, I have this thing about Africa rising, and I've always tried to make sure that I'm not the one who says it, that one day I'll have an interview where people they've been hearing it in every episode, but where we can bring it all together. Because you guys tonight not only just spoke about why it's happening, but you sort of cracked the code for the listeners on how it is happening. The basis about having parents deciding and making their decision that you are their investment, the fact that there are paths and they've decided that your path is education. It's not that they're asking, how we tell the jokes about, oh, you must be a lawyer, doctor. No, it's really about their part being education. And a lot of the outcomes of education has ended up in those titles. And then on top of all that, the idea that this is their investment for them to reap out of, and for you to feel that sense of responsibility, that's how you reward them. I mean, there's this connected experience that you all have cracked as to why it seems like the immigrant experience is tenacious and focused, and it keeps going. And I feel like we should use this as our great segue to my next segment, which is all about culture commentary. And I want you, Chris, to go first, because here we are talking about the African immigrant experience and how it's transforming, not transform, but how it's influencing how we go hard. But at the same time, we talked about earlier about, your relationship, the fact that, you're married now, you're a dad, husband. So how has Western culture then influenced you, if at all? Because, we talked about how much of our Africanness influences us. Now, on the flip side, then, into relationships, how has Western culture influenced you at all? What would you say are the principles that will help any man be a good husband and father? Let's go there.
Okay, let's start. So obviously I moved to the US at a little bit mature age. I was 26 when I moved to the US. Some people are married at that age already, So it's kind of, you're already a man, right?
Yeah.
Kind of. So you move to the US, and there's a culture shock in many ways, and not just with how people live their life, but how people interact in relationships, right? There's a huge culture shock, and some are great, and some are like, oh my God, what's going on here? When you step into I'm going to crack this joke, but when you step into a country where a girl can call you up and be like, Chris, I'm going for lunch. And then you're like, oh, and then you're thinking in your head, Oh, she's calling me that she's going for lunch. Oh my God. I got to check my card, I got to check my bank. Do I have some money or not? And then, you know what? You show up at the lunch, and then, you know, you're trying to see what she's ordering, to make sure it's within your pay grade,
Whether she
right?
wants to
It's
chop,
within the
she wants
limits.
to
Yeah.
chop lobster for lunch.
And then she goes hard, right? And I'm like, man, this girl's not considerate. Like, really? Then the bill comes, and she's like, oh no, I got mine, you got yours, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, the split
I
bill
mean,
thing.
that was a huge culture shock. I got to say that.
Okay.
Because
She
Okay.
didn't ask you for. She didn't send you for transport money.
yeah, because I was already working in Nigeria, right, before I moved to the US. So I already had like a life. I was working, I was socializing, I was meeting people, I was dating. It was never like that. Never.
So would you say then that Western culture for you then became experiencing alternatives or having a different perspective?
No,
How does
yeah,
that now transition to your
correct.
fatherhood and being husband
So
in that sense?
now you experience
Before you guys go forward, I would actually ask, like, I mean, to you, I think, Chris, the first thing I would say you should probably do, in my opinion, is what is Western culture to you? I mean, how would you define Western culture? Because I think ultimately, that's a key to like understanding how that kind of ties into like your perspective with respect, I guess, like, relationships wise,
So,
right?
Law, why don't you go there then? Because for us, what he was talking about with the Western culture and culture shock is the way we've interpreted the definition. The things that if things are similar, it doesn't. But if things are different,
absolutely.
we say,
I mean, absolutely. Because I mean, he gave an example of like, I guess, one portion in terms of the boldness of a woman per se. I presume, if I'm going to summarize that, your story is how maybe the women are a little bit more bold here than when you in the Cameroon, Nigeria.
And I feel like what Lauren said, right? Just getting into that definition, like Western culture, right? Western culture comes with a lot of diversity. How do I mean? With respect to the home, it comes with a lot of diversity. With respect to relationships, it comes with a lot of diversity. With respect to work, it comes with a lot of diversity. Because where we're coming from, a lot of things that were done before our parents were born are still being done today. There's a lot of rigidness to our cultures and the way we do things, right? So that would be my like a little like like an overlook of Western culture, right? And now in those diversities or quote unquote, cultures, right? I mean, what we call
melting pots in that sense.
There are things that were welcoming, obviously, and there are things that were not welcoming, and then you have to take into consideration that I didn't come here as a kid. I was already old enough, so I already had like some formative like
Experiences, like the things that this is what you've come to understand what life is supposed to be like.
So
let me ask you then, does it change your did it change your being a husband, for instance? Like, would you say
I wouldn't say it changed it, but I would definitely say it added some more to it. Because you move here, and let me say let me look at my parents' relationship, correct? Because that's like the first marriage we kind of all, for the people that have married parents, that's the kind of the first marriage you're introduced to, right?
Yeah.
You have the dad run the house, the mom supporting the dad, which is the basic system in most of our African cultures. Then you move here and it's like, oh, women are also top professionals, like CEOs in their in their professions,
Yeah.
and in some cases the women are the ones that are traveling for work. Not that the husbands do not have work or the men do not have work, but it's that diverse whereby the woman can go forth and be ambitious,
live her best life.
with a career and a profession,
with or without you.
yes, and
With
then
or without you.
and then the man can also do same.
Mhm.
But then it's something that I really admire here, right? Obviously. I'm not saying that my parents didn't have that same thing going on, but in the bigger picture, in an African setting, is not that common,
So what you're describing is interesting, because it now seems like you are for the culture influences. You are for the diversity. It has positive impacts on you. Contrary to the things that people would say about us, because that's what we're trying to demystify, right? People say, oh, Africans don't seem to, get it, but you're saying that it appeals. So let me ask Law this then. Law, would you tie that to the same experience for you, especially with, Chris is one kid in, right? With 3 on the way, but I'm just like,
Law is 3,
Law is
and maybe 1 on the way. You never know.
So I'm like, for being a father, then Law, do you see the cultural influences beyond the husband piece that Chris is talking about for fatherhood as well?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Chris touched on this point. The stereotypical African home is very, structured in like their gender roles, right? This is obviously emphasis on the word stereotypical, because I think that's a generational thing. That was really heavy in our parents' generation. So I think our current generation has evolved. But if we just talk about it just globally, stereotypical African home is very gender role. They have gender roles. The man is the man. The man does X, Y, and Z. The man is the breadwinner. The man, he's the hunter. The man will go out and bring what the wife will use and cook soup.
Yeah.
And the woman is the homemaker, the caretaker, the one who is supposed to make sure that if the kids don't do well, it's the mother's fault, right? Because the mom did not do as she was supposed to do. That's
ours is not just an expression. It has has the pros and the cons.
Exactly. It has repercussions. You know what I mean? And if the man does not do as he's supposed to do, the soup, they say good soup is money that
yes, we say it back home. We say good soup is made by
the phrase is good soup na money kill am. So good soup is because of money, right? So if the man is not doing what he's supposed to do, the woman can't do what she's supposed to do. Now, our generation is a bit different, which is why I said, what is your definition of Western culture? I think that even before a lot of the Western culture has already permeated the fabrics in Nigeria already. So that by the time some of us are coming here, we're already doing some of the things that are considered Western. So for example, I didn't understand when I came to the United States and I saw a guy who says, I'm the one who cooks in my house. He showed me his knives and he was showing me his kitchen utensils, and he was so proud of it. Like, this is like, and the wife was like, "Oh, I can't cook," and I was like, "What do you mean that?" I'm not understanding. You know what I mean?
I see that.
But to them, that's like
that's
nothing.
Normal.
That's normal. Like, they're looking at me like, "What? Why is this a thing?"
And then
that goes to that diversity that Chris is talking about. In that, in different homes, different things hold, and that is okay. Right.
Yeah.
And it's not as rigid as it used to be. Now, I grew up a little bit different. My dad was an oddball in the sense that, man, dude he's an incredible human being. And anybody who has met him will attest to this. He doesn't fit the mold of your stereotypical Nigerian man. Dude will go in the kitchen and cook for himself. When he met my mom expressed interest that she wanted to go to med school. There was talk about, why would you send your wife to med school when she's supposed to come here and start having kids and raising a home for you? And he said, if that's what she wants to do, he paid for her to go to medical school, and she had kids while she was in med school. And he would come when she has a big stretch of, block of work or tests or preparation and things. He will come and take us. And take me and my older sister, and we had people helping out, but he would primarily be the one, being responsible for us.
So you guys were already just seeing experiences,
which was unusual at that time. So that's why I say my experience is somewhat different, even till today. My dad, when I had my first kid, my dad left and came and stayed with us because me and my wife, our schedule was so tight. He was carrying Jidenna and feeding him, and when we'll go to work, I leave him with Jidenna. Yeah. That's, and so that was my experience, and that's what I was used to, so that shapes who I am today. So I don't know, so for me, that's not Western because that's what I was used to. But in the grand scheme of things, people will look at that as like a more of a Western
Yeah,
influence.
because what we talked about was stereotypical, right? But
Yeah.
one of the things that you've unlocked in this is if anyone is listening right now to the podcast, they're like, hold on. It doesn't seem like there was no such experiences. You know, sometimes people just say, oh, Africans are one way, whereas we had influences or life decisions that have sort of turned things that were deemed stereotypical. But on the flip side as well is that you both are saying that there's a lot more men who, as African immigrants that are now based here, that have had multiple experiences, they're not anti these ideas. These ideas are appreciated, or they understood, and they integrate. So let me ask you the big one then. Based on what you guys have described, I think you both will be able to answer the question that I try to answer in episode 2 of season 3 of my podcast. And if you're listening, guys, this is Don't Forget to Flush, of course. That podcast, you can follow us on social media. Don't forget to flush P on Twitter. Don't forget to flush the number 1, the number 2 on Instagram, so you can see more about all these episodes. But I was talking about, what do men really want? And so you guys have painted pictures as, some people will be listening now and be saying, Law and Chris are progressive. In my mind, I'm like, they just told you it's normal.
I didn't tell you how I run my home yet, though, but go ahead.
No, we don't want to get into that. The last thing we need is to create any... No. From the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So right now, we're like, we have an idea of how things might be going in your home. And that's why we want to find out about what's going on in your home by asking you this question that we've asked on the podcast. Okay. What do men really want from women? Law, you got. That's why we're putting you on the spot.
Man. I can launch this. No,
launch this. Bro, we can't discuss all of it, but
yeah. I mean, that's a very broad question, though, right? And I presume it's broad for a reason, right? What do men really want? You know,
from their women.
From their women. I mean, obviously, that goes without being said, because I don't want anything from Chris, you know.
You don't want anything from somebody who's not your wife. You're just talking about
I don't want anything from someone.
The one that you know.
So more specifically, what the men want from women, and specifically the woman that they've chosen. You know, I think, me and my wife are we communicate quite a bit, and we talk about things like this quite a bit, you know. I can only speak to what I want, right?
Yeah.
And I
no. Say that again, because I think people don't catch the importance of what you just said.
I can only speak.
Sometimes a lot of guys tend to speak about everything else, but please say it one more time.
No, I can only speak to what I want, because I genuinely believe that, there's this whole journey, man-woman journey, is not one size fits all, my brother. And I tell my wife always, I do the 80-20, man. You'll be looking at this other guy and you'll be like, man, look at how he's treating his wife. But I'll tell her that's part of his 80%. If he shows you his 20%, you might run. Are you getting me? So understand that we all have like strengths and weaknesses. But what do I want? I say I'm huge on peace, right? I'm huge on quality time. I'm huge on, do that thing that is just for me. Okay. Does that make sense? Makes sense. Whereby when, I genuinely value when a woman takes her time to do something just for me, if, and it could be something as small as, people they bring out a bunch of food, and that there's a particular one that I like, and you will take a bowl and you put it in the bowl and just put it on the side. Are you getting me? And you call me and you just maybe take one piece of meat and put it in my mouth and say, I did this one for you.
So graphic. This is so graphic.
No, but I'm telling you specifically. I'm telling you specifically, because I mean, things that I can give you big picture, right? But I'm giving you specific primarily because it's easy to tell you, oh, I want a good woman. I want a woman who can cook. I want a woman who, is respectful. I can give you that broad analysis. But ultimately, when it boils down to it, when you're in your home with the woman that you married or the woman that you're going to marry, there are certain things that you are looking for. And I'm telling you specifically what I am looking for is that personal connection whereby a person knows me enough to know how to take care of me, specifically me. You know what I mean? And I'm huge, and my wife will tell me, I talk about intentional loving. I'm very big on intentional love. I don't do passive love, whereby it's like, you know, I love you now. No, like intentional, like the love has to be intentional. It has to be, I did not just see the flowers and they were available, they were on sale, I picked it up. I went to the store to look for the flowers, you know, and I intentionally picked a flower that I know you will like, not the one that is on sale. Intentional loving. When I'm going to do, you know, like for example, when I pick my wife's ring, you know, the wedding ring I bought for my wife, intentional. You have to know the person, find out about this person. So I say that to bring it back to what I'm looking for, a woman who intentionally loves me, who takes the time to figure me out, who takes the time to understand. You know, we were talking back about like Western versus African, just to bring a point to that. You know, the way I run my home really is, you know, I have certain expectations, right, in the house. And before we got married, we talked about all of this, right? I don't believe a woman's role is in the kitchen.
That's fair.
I'm not one who believes that. However, I, Lawrence, would like a woman who knows how to cook for me.
Okay.
Right. Now, emphasis, I'm going to make this very important point here, because people will say, Lawrence, your wife is a doctor, you're a doctor. Why are you looking for somebody that can cook for you? If you are a woman that is a doctor that does not want to cook, fine. I have zero problem with that. All I'm telling you is that you are not the woman for me. You know why? Because there are women out there who are doctors who like to cook. That's the person I'm looking for.
And so there's the element of what you're describing. Seems like you see, folks, I told you guys I was on the money when I was discussing this in that episode. You're talking about the connection that comes through developing a friendship or an understanding of you, so that the person loves you intentionally.
So we don't have any misunderstanding.
Exactly. And then the communication, you talked about all the things you guys discussed even before you even got married. Very clear cut, you know, and this was something that I was talking about. So let me ask Chris, because I know we've sort of, I'm looking forward to grabbing you guys for episode 2, or let me say part 2 of this podcast, because we can't just do this in just one session. We're going to do a second part. So guys, yes, we're going to, I know where folks are asking, where's my Dingba and Diva and all the other things. We're going to do our second part to this. But Chris, to that question though, what would you say from your own experience do men really want from their women?
I mean, obviously, there's something Lauren said I'm going to also kind of specify on, which is personal, meaning what? And I say this to my wife a lot, right? When things happen around us, and to friends and family, I always say this. I'm like, a best friend can be the worst husband.
Okay.
The most trustworthy person at work can be the worst wife, right? Meanwhile, the laziest person at work can be the best husband, you know, because a lot of times when people say, what do men and women want, you know, in that context, I think they're trying to, they put it more on what the society is asking of, not what they want, right? So now, if you're talking about what men or women want, I'll narrow it down to what do I want, right?
Yeah.
Or what does my wife want? So that way, we're having a very direct definition, correct? Because I don't know every woman. And remember, your question was, what do you want?
What do men
from the
want?
Woman?
What do men want from their women?
The woman, yeah. So men are not, men are not sharing women, right? So it's more like, what does a man want from his woman? You know.
Thank you for redefining the question.
Yeah.
It's not what we wanted to do, but go ahead though. Answer it specifically. Because what you're describing is exactly what we want to hear. There's personalization, right?
Yeah.
And so within that personalization, what does yours look like?
So now the biggest thing for me, you know, from when I met my wife till this moment is big part is, you know, communication, right? In the sense of, I feel like if we build, you know, a strong communication, most things will flow. Not saying that we will not have points where we disagree. That's going to happen all the time, you know. All of that happens. But one big thing we built our relationship on was communication, right?
You know, that's a vague word these days.
No,
Like
yeah, I'm
specific.
coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm coming in. So it's communication, right? From the start. So now you can look at communication to mean, okay, hey, hello, how you doing? What's up? No, I'm talking about communication in depthly, right? I'll give you a little scenario, correct? Now, when I met my wife, correct, Ify, she lived in Ohio. I lived in Pennsylvania, correct?
Okay.
The best way we could have kept in touch was by calling each other, right? On the phone, on Skype, or whatever. But that form of communication leaves out a big chunk of your space, right?
Mm.
Remember, you communicate a lot with the space you are in. That's a big part of your communication. So, to add to that part on it, to communication, yeah, it's definitely vague, but how do we now make it more personal, correct? If you live 7 hours away from me, but I saw if you like twice every month for the range of our dating,
Yeah.
which meant that I drove to Ohio 7 hours, one way, 7 hours back, like twice every month, you know. And now, how did
Shout
that?
out to all those that are looking for ideas on long distance relationship.
So
Shout out
how?
if you're looking for ideas on long distance, it works. It works, but somebody has to drive 7 hours. Keep going, Chris.
So and then how did that kind of impact?
I hope you have gas money.
How did that impact our foundation? Right?
Yeah.
It got to a point whereby we know each other's comfort zone, right?
Mm.
So it's not just we're not meeting each other just on vacations, because
Yeah.
that's a setup stage, That's a directed stage. That's a script. Every vacation is a script. That is not you, because you can't live the vacation life for even a week. So
Yeah,
it's a
it's
script.
like going to the club and believing that you know how the person walks.
Yeah,
I mean, it's too
exactly.
dark to see anything anyways. Yeah.
Which is why I said the communication is broad, but to make it more personal, it's like, hey, who are you? What are you? What do you want from me? What do I want from you? And then I go like, okay, so but first of all, let's focus more on who are you before we go to what I want from you.
Mm.
Because when I can get that part of who are you, right? That is also you communicating to me.
Mm.
A lot of times people feel like they can only communicate with people when they're on the same wavelength with them. You see what I'm trying to go to, the personalization of communication? No, just show me who you are. Let me see who you are. Let me know who you are. You just be yourself, right? Because that goes a long way to also, create that understanding of the future, right? Can I be with this person? I'm talking about people that, and also one big thing here is, we're talking about this man and this woman, right? Two people, correct?
Yeah.
A big thing I want to also add to it is, remember, very key, not everybody values marriage the same way.
Mm.
That is something we always have to put at the back of our heads. Not everybody has the same expectation from marriage. Not everybody has the same definition of marriage, For me, one big definition of marriage that I've always had, which I feel like, kind of got us, together, and just, it's keeping us at peace. Obviously, peace is key.
Yeah, I mean, like that's why I titled that episode what they mean when they say peace. We're about to hear your own peace right now.
It's that oneness. The peace
Mm.
for me is oneness. How do I mean? Everything I'm doing, I have my wife at the back of my head. Everything that she's doing, she has me at the back of her head. Whether I'm doing something ugly, right? Something I'm not supposed to do, something, having her at the back, if I have intentions of doing things that may hurt her or, whatever, having her at the back of my head gives me a rethink, and for me, it's just like, I'm like kind of automatic, right? I don't have to think about it too much, because I have that definition that we are one, right? So if we are one, what I'm doing, this is her body, sometimes I joke with my wife, I'm
This is
like,
our body.
this is her body, and then hers is mine too, right? And how do I mean? It's like sometimes I joke with my wife, right? I'm like, babe, I have a picture to post for, Women Crush Wednesday, right? What a WCW, right?
Yeah.
And then I show her a picture, it's a picture of me. And then she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, remember, we are one. So I am you and you are me. And I've had people
So yeah, this is WCW.
this is my WCW.
This is logic.
I'm
Okay.
you and you're me. So
But Chris, there's something important Chris said. I mean,
Yeah.
Namo, not to take over your podcast, man, but don't you
No,
think
this
that
podcast has
he
been taken over.
he made,
Just
he made
keep
an
that.
interesting line of there's a nice clear line between communication and peace. That Chris just made right there. I know he was talking about, what he's looking for in his woman is communication, which is huge. I mean, I know it's vague, but huge. But you can draw a straight line from good communication and peace, because even when you are in a bad place, if you can communicate well, that maintains a certain level of peace that bad communication can't, and bad communication, if sometimes no communication is bad communication, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
Developing quality communication skills with your spouse, if you can find a woman that is capable of that, I think that you can draw a straight line.
I just feel like what you guys are describing, and folks, we're rounding off on this part one. I have to call this part one because this part one, we're just unpacking things from Cameroon, unpacking things from Makosa dancing in school, HBCU, unpacking things about, it is me, the way the person intentionally loves me, unpacking things about peace. I feel like this is a master class on husbandhood and fatherhood and life experiences that we need a part two. But to your point, which is very fair, which will help us get into our next part in a different episode, folks, is the fact that you've just drawn the line about all the work that happens before you get married, or all the work that goes on when you meet someone, all the learning the person and being able to allow the person be free, to what Chris was talking about. Or in your case, the intentionality that actually has to be applied. And it's not like you're winging it. You're just like, oh, let's just figure out. There's some level of intentionality that has to go into it. And the fact that both of you use the same language of peace, that when I told people that men use that word peace a lot, and this is what they're talking about, folks have to believe. I didn't pay you guys, and you guys are expressing it the same way we know it. So what we're going to do is this, folks. We're going to sign off on this episode. It's been a great conversation. I've had Lawrence Uradu, who's a medical doctor, and we have Chris Madu, who's an engineer. Brothers by meetup, by flex, by marriage, by hang. And we're really looking forward to having you guys on the next part to this conversation. So please join us. This is Don't Forget to Flush. And I think that's where we're going to start from, right? We're going to start from this peace element, bring it to some mental health things, talk about, successful women, and then tell you guys to stop saying my own experience is different. Bros, we're all on the same experience.
Right.
You know what?
Yes,
I'm out. We're out.
All right, thanks,
We're out.
man. Thanks.
All right, guys.
Cheers,
No,
man.
nice. All right, folks. Don't forget to Flush Podcast. Check us out on our next episode. And you know what? This masterclass, listen to season 3, episode 2, so that you can sort of understand where we're going with all of this. All right, folks. Talk soon.